Hello, everyone. I am Stan Berteloot, and as my accent does not indicate, I live in Princeton, New Jersey, where I advise organizations on growth, marketing and sales alignment, and the transformative power of AI for Nytro Marketing, which is a global integrated marketing agency. Our mission with those sessions, which we call the Nytro Marketer, is to delve into the many facets of marketing, discussing everything from career trajectories to skill sets to the tool that make it all possible. So before we kick it off today, let's see where you're streaming from. I see that some people are already connected. So let us know using the chat panel, let us know where you are streaming this session from in the world. So today I'm delighted to welcome Barry Sagotsky, who is an expert in strategic planning, an executive coach, and a team alignment expert. Barry's extensive experience spanning over 3 decades cover various industries from healthcare to technology. Today's focuses on a crucial skill set in our professional lives, mastering negotiation and communication. And indeed, communication is no longer considered a soft skill among the world top business leaders who are constantly striving to improve on those skills. Do you know that when Jeff Bezos was building Amazon, he surprised his leadership team by banning PowerPoint? He replaced slides with what he called narrative structured memos that contain titles, full sentences with verb and noun. So negotiation and communication are skills that define the success of marketers and sales professionals, and honestly, just about any professional. And it shapes the outcomes of our everyday interaction. Barry's background is impressive and diverse, from his pivotal role in companies like Janssen Pharmaceutical to Sharing Plow, to his expertise in conflict resolution and organizational development. So whether you're here to refine your negotiation tactics or to take your communication skills to the next level, you're in for a treat. As always, we look forward to your comment, your question, your personal anecdote to keep these sessions as interactive as possible. And if you're only joining us now, tell us where you're streaming from. And I will come back to that in a minute. But before we go any further, I would like to welcome Barry on stage. Barry, here you are. Welcome to the Nytro Marketer.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Stan.
So I see that you have a fan group here already. I see Jenny thanking you for the invite in the comment panel here, and apparently Jenny's from North Carolina. We've got Flo from New Jersey. We've got someone dialing in from Montreal. And we've got another person here, Adrian from Somerset, New Jersey. So yeah, guys, keep on telling us where you are streaming from. So how have you been, Barry?
I'm fine. It's getting a little chilly here, as you know. We're neighbors, so you have
yes, we are just
you have the same weather that I do. And
yeah. So Barry, as I was saying, your career spanned an impressive range of roles from leading Magnolia Lane Consulting to your pivotal work at global patient recruitment at GCI Group. Mm-hmm. You also managed development at Janssen Pharmaceutical, among others, right? In this diverse environment, you've been exposed to various management styles. And I would really like you to share with us what was the most fulfilling work you've done working as a consultant, and how these experiences have really shaped your approach to negotiation and communication.
Well, the easy answer is each new engagement, whether it's executive coaching or consulting or doing strategy, is the most fulfilling at the time. I totally immerse myself in whatever I'm doing at the moment. Looking back, there have been a couple of large engagements that lasted a while that were very fulfilling. I worked with the Quality, Safety, and Environmental Affairs group at Warner Lambert before they were acquired by Pfizer to get some evidence about how they were doing in their work in all those three areas, which are all compliance, somewhat related, but had different audit schedules and a whole different set of clientele from a lot of manufacturing, obviously, but it turned out about 500 key stakeholders around the world. And the sequence was straightforward and simple sounding. I created a customized survey to get feedback, which is a fundamental part of communication and negotiation, and to find out what was up for them. What are their issues? What are their aspirations? What do they want to do in terms of their quality, safety, environmental affairs, and how could this group based in New Jersey, but working globally, support them? And then I with the feedback, which we collected in real time from about 500 stakeholders, as I said, I trained 70 some odd people, which was the entire group, including support staff, to travel in small groups around the world to key sites where we gathered people together and told them what we'd found out, or they told them what they'd found out when I wasn't there as well, in a structured way, and had half-day sessions, which were followed up by meetings to discuss process, goal setting, and eventually, after a year or so, they wound up totally aligned in terms of understanding the priority of the issues, priority of the aspirations for all of the sites around the world and all of the marketing groups in the 5 different companies it was split into at the time. And as well as deciding to split up the different audits and preparation for audits so they weren't hit with 2 types of audits in a particular year. And they made sure that at the end of the process, all the goals from the CEO of the corporation on down as relates to quality, safety, environmental affairs were all aligned. So obviously this used a lot of communication skills, a lot of facilitation, which we're not going to go into today, a lot of negotiation when it turned out to what the processes would be. So that's one example it was very satisfying. It lasted about a year.
Right. So getting feedback from the team is essential, right? And how does that help you align team? I mean, can you give us some concrete ways you use that feedback in order to align different team who have different objective, as you said?
It's similar to what I do when I'm coaching people. I'm certified in a number of instruments, but I prefer to do individual interviews to get feedback. So with feedback in general, what I tend to do is to look for themes or look for common issues that pop up, common areas of ways to themes is the best way to put it, and then I check that out. I'll check that out with either the person I'm coaching or the team I'm working with. Says this makes sense. Let's do it. Perhaps in some cases it requires a little bit more research. It requires other levels of questioning to find out what does this mean, and then more importantly, why is this important? Getting context to the feedback gives some valuable insights into either creating a strategy, changing or creating a process, stopping doing something, starting doing something else, or in the case of an individual, try and go across the whole realm, deciding what behaviors they need to either do more of, do less of, or learn or stop. So the feedback is a starting point. What is done with the feedback is turning it into, moving it from data to information, moving it from something that that doesn't have context, that's not in a system of what's going on, not in a structure, but to really understand what's going on in the whole structure. Because all the elements, how things are done, the culture, all of that impacts the behavior of a person, an organization, in this particular case, a set of functions. And by the way, the whole thing was driven by the CEO, Ludovic de Vink at the time, who I had the pleasure of working with a little bit at Sharing before he went to head up Warner Lambert. And Ludovic said to the head of Quality, Safety, Environmental Affairs while I was in the room, he wanted what he called competitive compliance. He wanted to be able to sleep soundly at night, every night, completely through the night, and beat the competition wherever they were.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I think whenever you want to um, implement change, cultural change in an organization, having the backup of the top leader, of the CEO, is something crucial, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So we jumped into feedback and communication, but I want to go back to the negotiation tactics maybe before we explore communication. Can you share some of the strategies and tactics you found most effective in negotiation in various business scenarios?
No, I'll be glad to do that. What I'd like to do as a foundation for that is to talk about where I get the technology from that I'm using.
Okay.
All of the work I do, in fact, across everything, including negotiation, is based in the work of Robert Fritz, who invented a lot of different technologies for creating and what he calls structural consulting, which is very similar to systems thinking for those of you who may be more familiar with the MIT version of this. It's a way to quickly understand what is creating certain behaviors in people and in organizations. The negotiation relationship to that is that there's in Robert Fritz's works in terms of technology for creating starts with vision. What do you want? What are your aspirations? It can be stated in terms of goals, in terms of a shorter term thing, but really, what do you want to have at the end of this? And there's some questions I use to clarify that. The second step, not the first step, second step is then what's the relevant current reality? And then after that, it's what are the steps you need to accomplish what you want to achieve your vision, to realize your vision. And then who's going to do what if it's a team or a strategy. And this is the foundation for strategy. The way this relates to negotiation is quite simple. There's planning that is the first step. It's away from the actual face-to-face negotiation. And that includes what's the level of trust, for example, because trust is the foundation for negotiation, for leadership, for teamwork, for a lot of things. But in negotiation, it's critically important. What is it that you want in what priority order? What is it that the other party wants? What are the main issues that the other party has? What's the minimum acceptable solution? Things like that. There's a lot of detail that can go into this. And then in the simplest form is, what do I know and what don't I know as I'm going into this situation? And what I don't know are the things I'm going to need to find out using the communication things we'll get into a little bit later. After that, the face-to-face begins, and that starts with the climate setting, which is sort of schmoozing in the vernacular. So it's a little small talk. How would you like a cup of coffee when you're meeting face-to-face, or how are things going, or how's the weather, as you said to me? And it doesn't really have to last long, but it becomes an important part of the whole negotiation process. The next piece, in terms of a sequencer of negotiation that I follow and teach, is issue identification. And that's not just issues, by the way. It's what are the aspirations, what are the goals of the other party, as well as what's keeping them up awake at night in a cold sweat, which is a variation of a phrase that I use to find things out. And when I'm teaching this, I spend a whole day of a 2-day seminar working with people on really getting to understand that if they don't have all the issues identified, if they haven't asked questions well, if they haven't understood and demonstrated understanding of what's up for the other party about what their aspirations are, what they want, what they value, and what's keeping them up awake at night, then you don't have as much to work with when you get to the next step, which is bargaining. In the olden days, the first negotiation I had contact with was Chester Karras when I was working years ago with Time Life as a distributor for their management training stuff. And I got to write some role plays with him. But his whole model, as many negotiators were in the 70s, was in order for me to win, you have to lose. I'm much more in favor of what happened to a lot of the industry of negotiation after the Harvard Negotiation Project and Urey and Fisher came out with Getting to Yes in the early 1980s. I, in fact, helped write a training course about that. I was teaching consultative selling, and consultative negotiation is very similar along the same lines. So in the give and take part, bargaining becomes a key point. You don't necessarily tell the truth according to some methodology. I'm always a fan of just laying things out, getting more trust so you get the truth. But bargaining takes a bigger place, and you're negotiating for things and asks rather than values and satisfaction. And in my opinion, you're always negotiating satisfaction, and that leads to a settlement, and then there's lessons learned at the end of it. So that's the whole structure of it. Didn't answer your question yet, but
yeah, no, but you touched on very interesting points, and I've got a couple of questions for you. I also want to open it to the audience. If you have any question, make sure you ask them in the panel. Barry, when I hear you, I get the impression that when you enter into a negotiation, you spend a lot of time asking questions, understanding the values of the party you're negotiating with. So rather than forcing your way in, saying, guys, let's get to, down to business, it's really about understanding what's important for the other party.
Yeah, it's not just what they're asking for, but why it's important to them.
Yeah, at different level, right?
Yeah. Here's a principle in negotiation that I follow. It's out of the negotiation course I teach is based on the work of Ira and Sandy Asherman. It was invented 40 years ago. I've been teaching it for 30 years. I teach it throughout pharma and biotech, and I teach it at the FDA. But it's the same things I do with any kind of negotiation I'm consulting with. And trust and asking questions and understanding the other party is really related to a principle, which is the other party always believes they're right. And if anybody in the audience, if you would think that through, think about the last negotiation you were in. And the question is, were you right? And I'll bet everybody's going, oh yeah, of course I was. Mm-hmm. Either way, that's what the other party or parties are saying as well. So your job, one of your number one or two jobs, is to find out why the other party believes they're right. And that's not just superficial, that's why in relationship to what their needs are, what their wants are, what their issues are, and particularly what their values are, so that you can negotiate satisfaction. You can't negotiate satisfaction if you don't know what will satisfy the other party.
And do you have to recognize, do you have to blatantly say, I recognize that you believe this, X, Y, Z? Do you have to state that?
I spend a lot of time summarizing, this is in the area of active listening, which is one of the skill sets, summarizing, paraphrasing, adding on, asking for more information. There's different kinds of questions I can ask if I feel like I need more information or if there seems to be a discrepancy. This comes from Robert Fritz's technology in terms of questions, but it's also very good questioning technique comes from sales training. Anybody who's had sales training will know how to do this, pick the so-called layers of the onion off as they get into it. So I'll ask, if the opening question is something along, you wonder what's keeping you up awake at night in a cold sweat, and they'd say this. So tell me more about that. And full stop. And then say, so what you're saying is, so what I'm getting is this, and that, and sometimes they'll be able to imply something. So that seems to imply, am I right? Or I'll say, so what I've got so far is this, this, and this. Do I have that right, or what do you need to correct me on? Because my job is being right in demonstrating understanding about what their needs, interests, issues, and wants are. Mm-hmm. And only after for me, the way I do it and the way I teach it, once I get to that point and they say, yeah, that's it. And I will check that. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? And well, everything important. Well, tell me what else isn't important to you. I really want to know that too. Because I want to have lots of things when I go to bargaining to expand the so-called pie. If I have a pie of this size, I have number of pieces, but there's only so much to divvy up. I want to have a lot of things that I can divvy up in that so-called pie. This goes back to the Getting TS technology and the Harvard negotiation project. But the
we've got Flo saying it's a win-win scenario, right?
Well, we're working toward that, and the only way I can get to that is to know what will be a win for them. I know it's going to be a win for me. I haven't yet gotten to the point of talking about how I get to tell them that in ways that are not going to put them off, because that's important too. By the way, there's two things that happen when you're getting a lot of information. One of the things that you will discover if you haven't been doing this, or those of you who do this, is that you raise conflicts. Well, here's something I don't agree with, or something I won't go along with, or something that I'm not going to agree to.
when we prepared, you talked about assertiveness.
Yes, assertiveness is telling the other party what you want, what you need, or how you feel without putting them down, as opposed to aggression, which is expressing your wants, needs, and feelings and putting them down in some way. Then there's indirect aggression, which is using guilt. Oh, come on, Barry, you can take care of that, can't you? I mean, you're in that national account, but you're the senior vice president there. Can't you pull that off for me? That's aggressive, indirectly aggressive. And then there's
right? We call that.
You've gotten that. Anybody who's got relatives can relate to that. And the fourth part of that higher set of definitions is non-assertive, which is acting as if you have no wants, needs, or feelings. So that's important to know. Excuse me.
Yeah. And talking back about the skills and the techniques, I mean, you touched on that, but being able to formulate open question.
Yeah, well, the two types of questions that are usually defined are open and closed. An open question gets you a lot of information. Tell me about a time when if you're interviewing a candidate, for example, and many of the listeners would probably be familiar with that. I would want behavioral examples, and that's not tell me what you would do. It's tell me about a time when you. So there's formulating a question so you're in the general area of the response you want is a relatively high return on investment. And I see questions as investing a currency, and I want a larger return on my investment. However, there's times when I want to, if someone's talking a lot and they're changing topics or having a stream of consciousness discussion with themselves, usually, that leads me to think, that could go. So, here's what I would summarize, and then I might ask a closed question: is it this or this, and a yes or no question? The choice, or sometimes it's a choice of three. Are you very excited about this, somewhat excited, or not excited at all? And then the follow-up to that can be an open question, which is why. This also works in terms of using a closed question if people are non-assertive or non-responsive. And I do this with groups of people sometimes when they don't know each other yet, when it's early in the session, or a team, if I'm chartering a team or aligning a team. Just to get them engaged, I'll have them make some choices and have them affiliate near signs which says totally agree, somewhat agree, don't agree at all, and then have a discussion in those groups about why they went there, and then they can report out, well, here's what we talked about rather than what I talked about.
Right. Barry, tell me, in a negotiation context, when and how do you use silence?
Science, meaning?
Silence.
Oh, silence. I'm sorry. So my ears aren't working perfectly today, but I will check to make sure I've got it right. How I use science is different from the way I use silence. Silence is important, particularly after you've asked a question. Silence creates pressure on people to respond. And it's not a pressure ring topic, but it leaves space which people like to fill. First of all, the brains are going many times faster than, even though I'm in the Northeast and I speak at 150, 200 words a minute, people think at 1,000 or thousands of words a minute, or think in pictures. And they're way faster than me. They're ahead of me. That's why slides with bullet points, like you mentioned before, people are thinking ahead of that. That's why TED Talks, for example, don't have a lot of slides at all in them, and they're visual, or they're people just talking about what it is. It's communication, as opposed to reading or passing information on. So silence, if I'm asking a question, I will say, what are your opinions on? And then, and this is an example for all of you to experience, I'll do a 5-second wait, then I'll do a 10-second wait. Notice how that feels. So I'll say, so how do you feel about silence? And that was a 5-second wait, which may have felt longer, but I'm pretty good at counting according to time. And you get the idea. I don't really have to do a 10-second one, but try it yourself sometimes. And if you can wait 10 or even 15 seconds, if you really want a response from people, that's a way to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I do is I'll ask quite often if there are any questions about something, if I'm teaching something rather than consulting in something, or if the group has come to a decision, I summarize and I ask if there are any further questions, and there's a dead silence. Either, well, it could be any number of reasons, and I really don't know what it is at that point. So I use something I learned from the master consultant Peter Block decades ago. He uses, and I learned this, I picked it up from him. He uses the phrase, if there were any questions, what would they be? And people chuckle at that. And then I just pause for 5 or 10 or 15 seconds. And 999 times out of 1,000, there are outliers. I will get someone to say something and the rest of the group will chuckle. And if I continue that, if it's like even a half-day workshop, or if it's an ongoing meeting of some sort where I'm working with a team, all I have to do is say, if there were any, and not even complete my sentence, and somebody will say something, because people always have an opinion. People always have an opinion. I always want to learn it. And once people understand that the communication, the receptivity to what they want to say is there, and that I value and am very interested in what it is and why it is that they want to say or have or do something or not do something, people will respond.
Yeah, I mean, I could feel how uncomfortable this silence was, and we do want to fill the gap for sure. I wonder if people in the audience have experimented with silence, and please share your experience if you have. You spoke to me about how we should feel free to ask. In a negotiation context, ask people what should have done differently.
Well, at the end of a session, not necessarily. It depends in the context. I do this at the end of a coaching session. I do it at the end of interviews, like I'm collecting data for a project I'm working on currently. At the end of each interview, I make sure there's a couple of minutes to say, and this is the sequence: what worked particularly well, and perhaps why, after they've said what it is, why, and because I wouldn't really do that again or keep doing that. What didn't work so well, and I either want to stop doing that or modify that. And then I ask them, what should I do differently? What would you prefer I do differently? And yesterday I had an experience where someone said, we had limited time and you told too many stories. This is a different venue. Of course, I'm being asked to tell stories, so I'm telling stories. But from that, I got to learn, as I've learned before, by the way, in that particular, that venue, that area. I try to illustrate things, or I try to teach people even when I'm interviewing them. And in that particular case, that person gave me the feedback that didn't work so well. So now I'm alert, at least for now, and for the ongoing next few weeks anyway, top of mind, pay attention that I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't ask the question and didn't take the feedback seriously. I wouldn't be able to coachable.
Yeah. Well, I can see that as a coach, but in a negotiation, how can I use that? I mean, can I really tell the adverse party what should I've done differently? I mean, to create a rapport.
Well, that happens in the debrief at the end, after you've reached some kind of agreement.
Okay.
Once you've gotten to a settlement, because you really want another principle of negotiation is implementation as agreed. I'm always looking for a deal that will be implemented, not something that someone will renegotiate or relitigate later. So, in the debrief part, the sixth part of my the Airshipman's 6-step process is to do a review, to do a lessons learned, and that's where that fits in. So there's when I'm teaching, and that it just works. That's all I can say. I can go into why and how.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we see that people are either comfortable or less comfortable with silence.
We got a note from a jazz musician just before about silence, and
absolutely, yeah. I can see how it works there.
Yeah.
And we've got someone joining us from Philly here. So this is fascinating, and I would now love to hear what is the interplay between communication and negotiation in achieving successful outcome. Could you provide example from your career where these skills were pivotal, where you mix really communication and negotiation?
Absolutely. There was a time when I was part of my time at Janssen was doing HR things, organization development training, employee relations, exempt recruitment. But I spent the last 2 years there in national accounts. It turns out that some people the two people who had been in national accounts at the time took me along to try and do some so-called value added. And by the way, there is no such thing as value added. Customers either value something or they don't. And you just have to find what it is they value. And in the first meeting with the president of pharmacy for Cigna, which had at that point, that particular HMO had about 3 million lives in it. So it was a substantial client that we didn't have a contract with. And I remember, I won't mention the woman's name, but we actually became close friends after this. And it became my account later. The first thing I asked her was a variation on what keeps you awake at night in a cold sweat. And these fellows who were with me there, at the time it was Janssen and Ortho and McNeil. We were separate companies. They all joined in Earl Janssen at this point in time. But none of the folks from J&J had pharmaceutical contracts with the Cigna HMO. And I asked her, what are your biggest issues? And I listened carefully, and I paraphrased, and I fed it back, and I summarized, and I said, tell me more. And it was like the other 4 or so people in the room were watching a tennis match. It was going back and forth and back and forth. And about 45 minutes later, as I recall, it was certainly longer than the 10 or 15 minutes they usually got, she said, I don't have your products on the formulary, which is the ability to buy them and prescribe them and use them. I want proposals from all of you, and I want to put all your products on the formulary. From one meeting where I started off, as I always do, asking questions. Tell me about you. What's going on with you? What's on your mind? What's keeping you up awake at night in a cold sweat? What do you want to have happening? I helped her create a better partnership with the chief medical officer in the HMO. I brought in an expert HR person to talk about teams from one of the big universities at our expense, which we were allowed to do in those days. So is that a reasonable example? Does that make sense?
It does. What do you think in this very situation made the difference? Was it you starting with your open question? What was it? I mean, because you said people looked at it as a match.
No, they looked at it because there was no interaction before. She would say, tell me what you got. And they'd say, take all our stuff. And then they'd walk out.
Okay.
And then this one, I was finding out what the needs and interests were and, what's behind what would make her satisfied in a deal. And what it turned out was, in that particular case, being understood, being listened to, being respected in terms of her aspirations, her issues. It wasn't making a deal right there. It was asking for the proposals to start negotiating to make the deal. So what I closed on was the next step in deal making, which was, okay, we can talk. I opened the channel, which is a fundamental thing in communication, whether it's conflict resolution or selling or negotiating or just being with friends. The first deal is opening that communication channel. If somebody's saying, I got to have this, well, let me understand what it is you need, is a good response.
And it seems so basic, right? Remembering that we are all human beings and we all have our own aspiration, right?
That's right. Everybody wants something and needs something and be based on values, based on culture. I've worked in a lot of places around the world. I used to do strategic planning throughout North America and in Eastern and Western Europe and in Russia, and and I've done negotiating training in all those places and in parts of Asia as well. And the more places I go, the more I know what I don't know, that I really don't understand. And I don't go in with an estimation that I do understand a culture, even if I've studied it, even if I've read about it, even if I've been there before. And I am aware that each situation is each situation, and I have to approach it knowing that I might not know something, and I probably don't. So I got to find out, which is where, going back to your original thing about questioning and open questions, that's why I'll find out. I mean, I was teaching a class in India a few years ago, negotiation class to a regulatory group. And I wanted to know, because I'd asked people this before, I said, and I don't know if I'm doing the motion right. What does this motion mean? Does it mean yes or no? And the answer was absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've read books on gestures and I've looked at cross-cultural things, but I at the moment, it was the right thing to know, because that led me to be able to ask the question now, well, are you agreeing with me about what I just asked? Which is a different question and a closed question, which follows up on the open thing about yes, could be no. And like Japan, for example, if someone says hi, that says yes, but that just means I heard what you said.
Yeah.
And the same is true across many cultures and languages.
Barry, what do you make of what Flo wrote here?
Seek to understand before being understood. Absolutely. That's a great way to do it, Flo, and glad to see you here too. And I use a physical thing. I say you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally. And it's really and the demonstrating understanding, which I didn't finish my caveat to that. That everybody wants to be understood. Everybody believes they're right. And the reason a lot of people, it turns out, in my experience, in my inquiry, turns out to be true, is people don't necessarily want to find out everything because they might not agree with what they understood. I can't go along. I understand what they're asking for, and I won't do that, or I can't do that. And there is a sign I put up which says, understanding is not equal to agreement. Just because I understand you doesn't mean I agree with you. And sometimes I have to lay it out that way. Certainly when I'm teaching it, I hammer this into people. Ask the questions, find out everything you can. Demonstrate that understanding. It will build trust. There's another principle in negotiation, that it's an ongoing relationship. I'm not talking about buying gas at a gas station and arguing about the price, because first of all, it's not going to do any good. The price is the price. Either I get the gas or I don't. But I didn't like the service. You put the nozzle in, you made noise. So I'll never see the person again. Now, this is an ongoing relationship, whether it's a personal relationship. In this case, what we're talking about here is business relationships.
Right.
And Stephen Covey did.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
The 7 right.
So do you want to say a word for people who are not familiar with Stephen Covey?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to say a word about who is Stephen Covey for those who may not know him?
He's a well-known author talking about communication and relationship building, and one of the small claims to fame, about 24 years ago, I was included in a book that he was also included in as a thought leader in consulting.
Okay.
And Bev Kay and Marshall Goldsmith. I don't even know if it's still available. It's called I don't even remember what the title was at this point.
Okay. Well, Barry, this time flies. This has been fascinating, and we're already getting to the end of our session here. Yet, before we go, can you leave us with some key pieces of advice? What would you give professionals looking to enhance their skills in communication and negotiations?
Start off with doing your preparation. Do your research and find, it's not a matter of what you know, but it's as important to know what you don't know. And you can only do that through having some structured way of planning about what are your wants, what are your aspirations, what are your must gets? Where will you walk away from the deal? Where will they walk away from the deal? What are your intend to gets? What's your target of what you'll get? And also, what do you hope to get? If everything goes perfectly and people say yes, yes, yes to what your requests, your asks are, then have something in your pocket in your planning to say, yeah, and by the way, I'd like that delivered by a drone, whatever that happens to be. Another thing is continually summarize in your discussions. And at first, it will seem awkward. It will seem like you've got a personality transplant if you've been dealing with somebody and all of a sudden you're checking your understanding. And it will pay off. It will build even more trust. And trust, again, is the foundation of negotiation. It's the foundation of teamwork. It's the foundation for leadership. It's the foundation for so many things. Know where you're going. Have your aspirations and set your aspirations high. That goes back to the Fritz technology of structural attention. What's your vision? What do you want if anything were possible? And then after that, what's the relevant current reality? What do you have and not have? What do you know and not know? Who's on your side? Who's not on your side? Are there other forces for and against? Are there any patterns or trends going on that you need to know relevant to your aspiration? So those things in particular, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them proportionally. Inquiry beats advocacy is another thing to remember quite easily. Off the top, those are enough things there for tips to work on, I think. What do you think, Stan?
I think it's perfect. I mean, what struck me is that sometimes we are so obsessed about what we need to get out of a deal that we forget we are speaking with human beings who have values, who've got needs, and as you said, who also believe that they are in the right.
Yeah, they always do.
So we start on a very bad foot if we don't take into account everything you talk to us about, right? Understanding that we both are convinced that we are right, and that we need to approach it as a discussion, I think, to start.
We don't have to fight about it. We can actually get a better chance to compromise or even collaborate if we know what will satisfy each of us.
All right. Okay, well, Barry, thank you. It has been fascinating. I don't know, and I think the audience also found it fascinating, which is what we want to achieve here with the Nytro Marketers.
Did you get a chance to put my email up if anybody wants to?
I did several times, and I will again.
I was paying attention to you. I missed that.
I think everybody saw it, but here we go again. Barry.Sagotsky at Verizon.net. You are a coach. You are helping top leaders in the pharma industry, I believe, today to achieve their goal.
Well, a number of industries in chemicals and energy and transportation and infrastructure and in communities. It's and I'm on lots of areas. It's the technology works anywhere.
Right. No, I know that you're also involved with nonprofits.
Yes.
So it was fantastic having you today here, Barry. Thank you so much. And everybody, have a good day. Thank you for attention.
Thank you, Stan. Goodbye, everybody.